What's up, guys, and welcome to Week 5 Player Pool, NFL Week 5 Player Pool. I am taking a look at the main slate for DraftKings. Going to break down all the advantages I see in matchups and potential leverage spots, and I already see a few that could help us out big time this week, and I'm going to get into it right after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCon with Heat Seeker Sports. You're watching Player Pool. Going to break down the DraftKings main slate for everybody. Usually on these shows, I'm taking a first real look at the slate and breaking down a player pool. I do this later in the week because I don't want any early week DFS thoughts, like influencing my decision making when I build my lineups. And it's worked well this year so far. I've had a third place finish in the slant, and last week I was right there in the spy for a big portion of the day. I think it was like the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter of the last game is where I ended up losing my ground in that one. But I was in sixth place in that one, and I had like Marvin Harrison and someone else from that popular game in there, and they both ended up choking. So it didn't work for me last week, but this week, hopefully we can have a little bit more success. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 30 likes to put out a shorter video closer to lock. You're going to want to subscribe to the channel and sign up for alerts so you know when that shorter video comes out. That's where I have my favorite plays. So far, I've been doing better on the main slate than Showdown this season. It's usually the opposite way around. So main slate's been really good for me. If you're into Showdown, I put out a show with Spread a Stare already on the London game. So check out the YouTube channel. We have a game script episode up for the London game where we break down and build DraftKings Showdown lineups for that game. There's not going to be a lot of content probably out for the London game. So if you're looking for a breakdown of that game, feel free to check out the YouTube channel, and another reason to subscribe to the channel for the Showdown breakdowns. So let's dig into it. Make sure I'm presenting here. Going to take a look at this main slate here, and I do think that there is a lot of spots where we can get some leverage on the field just based on what I've seen so far for ownership projections. Ownership projections is about as far as I'll go when I'm looking to see, where maybe some of this DFS popularity is going for the week. And I do that like just to get an idea to see if my initial thoughts after I review the slate and kind of dig in a little bit are the same as where the field might be. And that's another reason why I like doing this later in the week, because you weed out a lot of the influence. A lot of times throughout the week, if you're watching and listening to this content, then people will hammer it in your heads that you need to start certain players and that their matchup is too good to pass up. And if you don't have it, you'll be in the dust and everything like that. But a lot of times that doesn't come to fruition. More often than not, it doesn't come to fruition. And if you just go with your general thoughts and spreadsheet on the slate, then you'll do a lot better than you will if you're listening to all these DFS people throughout the week. So keep that in mind when you're taking a look. It's good to make your spreadsheet early in the week. At least this is what I do. I make my spreadsheet early in the week. I might read an article like Rich Rebar's article, which is just pure analytics and stats. I like reading articles like that where you don't have people just kind of pounding their picks into your head and stuff like that, because that's where the problems can happen. You just want to take a pure analytical based approach to this stuff and try to get as much like influence out of your decision making as possible. That's at least what I like to do, and I've had a lot of success with it this year. So let's take a look at the first game. Looking at the Carolina Panthers versus the Chicago Bears. I am not a huge fan of this game. As far as matchup, there are a few good matchup spots. I just think with Carolina, we want Andy Dalton when we know that he can be competitive in the game and he can utilize those Carolina weapons. But in a game like this, Chicago's defense has been pretty strong this year. They are not allowing a lot of fantasy points other than to, let's see. Yeah, like tight end and wide receiver wideouts. They have middling matchups in a game like this, but really there's nothing that stands out on the Carolina side, which makes me think it would be more of a one-sided affair on the Chicago side. This is a Andy Dalton revenge game, so maybe that's something going for it. But other than that, on the Chicago side, I see a few good matchup spots, like the quarterback is getting one of the top, the quarterback scores from the matchup versus Carolina, with Carolina giving up 17.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. That's a top 10 number. As far as running back, Chicago running backs are getting 30.9 DraftKings points a game from Carolina's defense. That's a good number. And the wide receivers, wide outs, are getting 25.6 DraftKings points a game in this matchup. Problem with some of these numbers is that Caleb Williams has been struggling this year. This could be a get right spot for him, but do we really want to trust him and try to figure out like the hodgepodge of wide receivers? He's got 3 really good wide receivers, and none of them are really doing that well this year. So, trying to figure out these wide receivers and could just be a struggle, like in general, on top of having the good matchup for the running backs. They could decide to come out here and run the ball. You're looking at DJ Moore. He hasn't gotten more than really 15 DraftKings points all season. If you look at Keenan Allen, he's been hurt for more of the season, but he's had 2 dud games. And Odunze was good when Allen was out, but now Allen is back, and he only got 2 DraftKings points last week. So you can kind of see like these players, they just don't help each other out as far as fantasy points. Deontay Johnson is getting a ton of work, but he's got a difficult matchup this week against the Chicago defense. Chicago's been really good on defense. They're only allowing 16.4 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. I think we can find better matchups. The opportunity will be there for Deontay, though, but it's just a matter of if you want to take the risk. He's got 2 weeks in a row over 20 DraftKings points when Andy Dalton took over as quarterback. So the opportunity is going to be there. It's just going to be a matter, do you think he can beat this matchup? I think for his price at 6,100, we can find better opportunity on the slate where we can get guys with better matchups. As far as the running back, we saw DeAndre Swift last week. He broke out. He got 29 DraftKings points. He's in another cushy matchup. But before that, he had 8 as his peak. So do we really think that DeAndre Swift is, back in it? Like, is he going to be, like returning to form? He's never really had too much form, but will he have another breakout week against Carolina? As I mentioned, Carolina, this is the best running back matchup, just about the best running back matchup you can ask for from a fantasy scoring perspective. So DeAndre Swift, he'd be a good guy to keep in your player pool at 5,700. But, talk before last week was Roschon Johnson, kind of taking over a lot of the work. And, DeAndre Swift had a big week last week, but is he going to revert back to what we've seen throughout the rest of the year? So DeAndre Swift, there's a lot of risk there, but there's a lot of reward too. Let's get an idea of his ownership. DeAndre Swift looking at a 17% ownership. So you got a pretty decent, like high ownership on him on top of all those concerns. So, they could fade 17% of the field just by not playing DeAndre Swift. And, he could easily revert back to 6 fantasy points this week. Chuba Hubbard, the other guy that's getting volume, he's blown up with Andy Dalton as well. Problem with Chuba Hubbard, Carolina, better matchup than Deontay, I'd say, with Chicago giving up 24.4 DraftKings points a game. So a little bit more confident in Chuba this week. But, he's looking at a 20% ownership as well. So, you just got to kind of evaluate the situation. 6,100, you can't really go wrong with that price. He's got the opportunity. I don't hate him in the player pool, but this game in general, I'm not overly excited to play anyone in this game. If we're looking at Baltimore versus Cincy, this should be a higher scoring game. We're looking at a 50.5 point total, probably a lot of ownership on this one. The problem with Baltimore versus Cincy is the matchups aren't that great. There's a lot of red on my spreadsheet in this game and yellow. So it's kind of middling matchups. Baltimore has been weaker against wide receivers this year. They're allowing 21.5 DraftKings points a game to the wide receiver spot. They just destroyed Buffalo last week. They held Buffalo to pretty low fantasy production last week, and Derrick Henry went off last week. Derrick Henry's in another decent matchup. They're playing against Cincinnati, who's been giving up 21.2 DraftKings points a game. Depending on the game flow is really where you want to use Derrick Henry. I do like him this week. I think Derrick Henry's a good play this week against Cincinnati, who's been struggling, but a divisional game as well. Keep that in mind. Cincinnati will probably play this more competitively, at least than they've been so far this year. They had Higgins back last week, and they looked like a better team. I think they still lost the game. Higgins ended up with a bunch of targets last week. They got, they ended up winning the game. That was against Carolina last week. So 10 targets, 6 receptions, 60 yards, 12 DraftKings points for Higgins. But he's been back a couple weeks, and he looked like he was back, closer to form last week, getting all those targets. He's only 6K too. So 6K for Higgins in a matchup, where we're expecting a high total in this one. Problem is with Higgins, let's check out and see what the ownership is looking like. 7% ownership, so that's really not that bad. So Higgins, I think we can have in our player pool this week, despite the matchup. This is 19 point. Actually, no, this is a good matchup. 21.5 DraftKings points a game is what Baltimore's giving up. So I don't mind Higgins this week. Chase has that same matchup. Chase, he hasn't been getting targeted a ton this year. 6 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets. He held out in the preseason, so he didn't play any preseason games or get a lot of reps in training camp or anything like that. But you can see the last 2 weeks, 32 and 17 DraftKings points. I definitely don't hate leaving Chase in the player pool. He's expensive though at 8K. Considering the opportunity that he's gotten so far this year, but Chase is a guy that can break out anytime. Save Flowers, not really interested in Flowers. He's really not getting opportunity, and he had one big week back in week 2, but in general, this is a guy that doesn't really score over 20 DraftKings points, and we're looking at a 6,400 salary on him, so not a huge fan of Zay Flowers. If I'm going anywhere on Baltimore's side, it's going to be to Derrick Henry this week. Josephus does not have a great matchup. The slot defense of Baltimore this year has been middling. They're allowing 12.8 DraftKings points a game, so I don't hate it if you need the salary relief, but Josephus is at 4K. I think I have a player under 4K that we can lean towards finding a player for salary relief this week. And also, I like the tight ends on Cincy this week. I think more than anyone in Gesicki. Gesicki didn't do anything last week, but they were in a good role throughout the game, like as far as the lead and everything. They didn't really need Gesicki. Eric All was taking over a lot of that work. All was a guy I recommended in my short video last week. He ended up getting 4 targets for us, 6.8 DraftKings points. I think that was enough to get him into the the winning lineup in the slant last week. Gives us some nice salary relief at 2,700, and the tight ends have the best matchup in this game. The Cincinnati tight ends, with Baltimore giving up 15.4 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. So I really like all, and I like Gesicki in this matchup too as potential pivot points. Let me see what their ownership is. I know a lot of people are on Kraft this week. Kraft has a high ownership. So let's see. Looking at Kraft with a 16.35 ownership, and he is 3.5K. And you compare that to Gesicki, who is at 3.4K, and he's got a 3% ownership. And the matchup and the usage is just about the same for Gesicki and Kraft. They're both in timeshares at the tight end position. Kraft's been getting a little bit more work than Gesicki, but between Gesicki and All, if I was choosing one of those guys, I think we can get some salary relief with those guys and also get differentiation in our lineups. So overall, this should be a good game. This should get popularity. But as far as what I like on this game, it's mostly the tight ends and maybe those Cincy receivers. I don't really see and Derrick Henry. So it's not a game that I'll be game stacking, but skinny stacks I think are going to be in my lineups this week. Buffalo versus Houston. This is another game that's getting hyped up. This is a game with a 47.5 point total, 1.5 point spread. Sorry, guys, still recovering from that cold. 1.5 point spread in this one. As far as quarterbacks, obviously Josh Allen and CJ Stroud, two stud quarterbacks. As far as the matchups, Allen would have the better matchup at 18.7 DraftKings points a game, which is what Houston's defense is allowing to the quarterback position. As far as the best matchups for Buffalo would be in the slot and Khalil Shakir, but we don't know what Shakir's status is currently. Oh, actually, it looks like he's out. So Khalil Shakir is going to be out. If he's out, then Samuel, I think, would be interesting at 4,200. Houston is giving up 16.3 DraftKings points a game to the slot position, and that is where Samuel is running about 70% of his routes. Expect him with Khalil Shakir out to get a lot more work, and he's only at 4,200. He's going to be another salary relief guy for us. Let me get an idea of what his ownership is looking like. Curtis Samuel is looking at about 1.6% ownership for a slot guy, taking over probably a lot of the work that Shakir is going to be losing. So Curtis Samuel, the guy that Buffalo went out of their way to sign in the offseason, and they have not used him yet this year. So Samuel could have his breakout week this week against Houston. Obviously, you're going to need to throw in a competitive game. Diggs is another guy that I like. I like the situation with Diggs. It's a revenge game against Houston. Like a lot of it felt like hard feelings when they left. We know that Houston is going to need to throw the ball. Diggs does not have the best matchup in the slot, with Houston only giving up 16 DraftKings points a game. But in order for them to stay competitive in this one against Buffalo, expect them to throw the ball a decent amount. And let me look at the man coverage versus zone, see if we can get an idea of any advantages in here. Bills playing a top 10 rate of zone coverage this season, and Stephon Diggs has a 21% target share versus zone coverage. So while the matchup might not be the best, we know that Diggs will probably be getting opportunity, and he's probably going to the slot matchup is better than wideout matchup versus the Bills anyways. So I do like Diggs in the player pool this week. And he's only, well, he's 6,900, so he's not cheap. So there's a few guys in this game. Overall, these guys are really expensive. Akers is another guy that has a decent matchup. Buffalo has been weak against the run. We've seen it a few weeks now. Last week, Derrick Henry ran all over them, and Akers has not done anything yet. But this is probably the best matchup that he's had so far. Jacksonville was a pretty good matchup. He didn't do anything against Jacksonville, but the team was playing from behind in that game or competitively in that game for a big portion of it. So they were relying more on the passing game. So Akers could be interesting this week at 5,500. So, got to keep in our player pool. James Cook, I don't like the matchup for Cook, even though I've been burned by Cook several times already this season. You could start him as maybe a potential guy that's going to take up some of those targets left behind by Shakir. Other than that, yes, Curtis Samuel, Josh Allen, and Steph Diggs are probably my favorite plays in this game, I'd say. So if we're going to Indy versus Jacksonville, this is a game that I really like. I don't like seeing the rain there, though. We're going to have to keep an eye on that weather. If there's rain, then this game's going to get killed. I really don't like seeing the weather situation. But I'll dig through this game anyways. Keep an eye on the weather for this game tomorrow, because if it rains, then it's going to kind of take this game out of contention. But I do like this game as a like a sneakier game that could go over the total. We got Jacksonville versus Indy, two bad defenses. If I'm looking at my spreadsheet, there's a lot of green on my spreadsheet, and that's usually how I kind of pick out these games of the week and pick out these pivot games. I really like the quarterbacks in this one. Each of these teams has given up over 20 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. Trevor Lawrence is getting 20.7 DraftKings points against the Indy defense, and whoever starts for Indy is getting 22.2 DraftKings points. Hopefully, it'll be Flacco. If it's Flacco, we know that he can pick apart a defense like this and give value to those wide receivers on the Indy side, which we would need for this game to be a shootout. If it's Richardson, we're just hoping that he'll overcome his inaccuracies and be able to light it up. Problem with Richardson, he's played 8 NFL games. He's left hurt in 4 of them. So you can't rely on this guy, even though he has monster upside. He's a good price at $6K. He's in a good matchup, but he hasn't been able to get the ball to these receivers. We need a consistent quarterback for these receivers to have any value for us. I like Pittman in this game. I like Downs in this game. Downs is 5,100. Pittman's about 6K. You saw Downs when he's unlocked by a good quarterback, he gets 22 DraftKings points last week. You saw Pittman unlocked by a good quarterback, he gets 20 DraftKings points last week. And I won't say good quarterback because I like Richardson. We need an accurate, consistent quarterback in a game like this for it to pop off the way that we want it to. Otherwise, maybe you're running Richardson naked against Jacksonville. But for this game to work, we need the weather to work in our favor, and we need Flacco as the quarterback so that we can unlock the value in the wide receivers, which is going to make this game valuable to us because Jacksonville's giving up 25.9 DraftKings points a game to the wide receiver position. They're giving up 14.7 DraftKings points a game to the slot. They're giving up 27.4 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. We got a situation here where Taylor is out. We're looking at Sermon as the primary back. Sermon did not do anything last week, but as the primary back, Trey Sermon's at 5,700, and this is about as good a matchup as you can ask for. ETN also in a good matchup. All these guys are in good matchups. ETN, the Indy's giving up 20.7 DraftKings points. It's a little misleading. They're a lot worse defense than that. But the past couple weeks, Indy has been playing well against the running back position, depending on how much you believe that, is how much exposure you'll want to ETN. I happen to think that if this game shoots out, I think that ETN will be a part of that, and I think that he'll have a decent role in this game. Other than that, tight ends on Jacksonville side have a good matchup as well. So when I'm building lineups for this week, I'm gonna be including some Jacksonville versus Indy in it, but it's really just going to depend on weather, and it's going to depend on who's going to be the quarterback for Indy this week. Is going to depend on how much exposure is worth having to this game. If it's Flacco, I think the game goes over the total. And if it's Flacco and no rain, I think the game goes over the total. And I think that these weapons are going to have value for us. So let's move on to the next game. Got Miami versus New England. This is a game that's like an ignore for me. The only interest I would have is in Ramondre Stevenson. I like Ramondre because talk about him has been like how he's washed, how he's not going to get any run, but he's in a really good matchup this week versus Miami, who's given up 28.3 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. New England likes to run the ball. You can expect them to, want to do a decent amount of running in this one. They are actually favorites in this game, and they're playing at home. This is a rare situation you'll see Ramondre in this week. Just a good situation for Ramondre. He's had fumbling problems, which has been killing him. He's at 6K, though. He's affordable. So really, apart from the defense, that's all I'm interested in. Patriots defense. You could probably run out the Dolphins defense, honestly, as well. They're more expensive, so I like the Patriots better. But, like really in this game, like those are the only spots I'm interested in. Cleveland versus Washington is another game that I would imagine would be popular. Let me take a look and see. Jaden Daniels is at 12% ownership. Deshaun Watson is only at 4. I would lean Watson in this game just based on the matchup that we've seen with Washington for these opposing quarterbacks. They're giving up 20.8 DraftKings points a game. My problem with this game is Cleveland's defense. If Cleveland's defense is able to slow down Washington, that's going to take out the shootout potential. And Jaden Daniels is a lot more expensive than he was earlier in the season when I was recommending him. He's now at 6,800 in a difficult matchup. If he beats this matchup, then he might be able to be considered a little bit matchup proof. But currently, I don't want to take too many chances on Jaden Daniels because there's so many other better opportunity on the slate. And Jaden Daniels has like a above 10% ownership, which I'm not really into in this particular week. We got bye weeks this week. We got all sorts of opportunity to whittle down the slate and make our player pools really tight this week. And I think as far as Jaden Daniels, I'll be leaving him mostly out of my player pool this week. And Watson is the guy that I like more. You can see Watson for all the negative talk about him. We've got a 15 DraftKings point week. We've got an 18 DraftKings point week. Those are pretty good weeks for this season. Keeping in mind this season and the context. But Watson, has about as good a matchup as you can ask for, with Washington giving up 20.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They are giving up 25 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts and 21.5 to the slot receivers. This is a weekly target for us against Washington. And Deshaun Watson is 5,300. He's only sub 5% owned as far as what I see for ownership projection. Cooper is a guy that's been dropping balls and looking like crap out there. But you see the upside with 27.6. That's his upside ceiling. So he can break out at any time. He's 6,200. And Judy even has a good matchup in the slot. As far as targets, look at the targets. 9, 7, 6, 8. Hasn't done anything with them yet. But this could be the week where we see Jerry Judy even have a big week. And he's at 5,200. I don't hate using guys like um, Judy and Watson and Cooper this week. We're really just hoping though for Washington to overcome the matchup because there's every position is red against Cleveland except for the tight end position, and there's no one of interest on the tight ends on Washington's side that I'm interested in using. So I really just don't like the matchup for Washington. But if you were going to do a Watson stack and run it back, I think McLaurin would be the guy to do it with. 18 DraftKings points, 23. He's been coming a bit alive now that Jaden Daniels has been unleashed a little bit and allowed to throw the ball. I think if I was stacking this game, I'd lean on the Cleveland side, and I'd run it back with a single pass catcher for the Commander side. So McLaurin would be a good candidate there. Um, really, that would be it for me at 6,100. Noah Brown is out. Maybe that's good for Luke McCaffrey. McCaffrey, he's running 85% of his routes from the slot. That is where, let's see, Washington is pretty strong from the slot, so I'm not in love with that matchup. But McLaurin, to me, it's really McLaurin or bust if I'm going to be stacking this game, and then you're just hoping that McLaurin does something. All right, so moving on to the next game. We got Denver versus Vegas. This is another one, like ugly game, but I do like the matchup for the running backs on the Denver side. We're looking at 26 DraftKings points a game is what Denver is giving. Vegas is giving up to running backs. Problem is, it's a mess with their running back situation. 5,200 is pretty cheap for a starting running back. Javonte Williams, if we wanted one of these guys to break out, we'd hope for Javonte to break out. 16 attempts for 77 yards last week with 3 targets as well. That's not horrible. 4.8 yards per attempt against the Jets, which is a tough defense. There was a weather game, so they knew that there was going to be a lot of running in that game too. Against this easier matchup in Vegas's defense, I don't mind Javonte Williams as a salary relief guy, and I don't mind pairing him with that Broncos defense. Samir White is out for this game as well, so keep that in mind. Madison could be interesting at 5,200, but Denver is really they're pretty strong against the run. They're a top 10 unit as far as fantasy points against the run. So I really am not interested in anything on the Vegas side. They got too much drama going on in Vegas right now. I think that Denver could swoop in and take advantage of that. I just bet on Denver to win the division. They got like plus 1,400 odds. I bet on Denver and I bet on the Chargers to win the division. Chargers are plus 1,100. Both those teams are 2-2, and Kansas City is 4-0. But Kansas City has basically lost their entire team. So, Patrick Mahomes. We saw last week the Chiefs were able to barely like crawl into a like first place, like first place in their division. They got like lost home field advantage in their playoffs, everything like that. It was like the worst season, and this year they're even worse. So they lost Hollywood Brown, they lost Rashid Rice, they lost Pacheco. Kelsey is looking old, and they're just like, how are they going to win the division? They're only 2 games up on Denver, and they're 2 games up on the Chargers, who both have solid coaching foundations there. And that's what I like about both those teams potentially taking the division. So it could be sneaky bets there, but plus 1,100 on one of them and plus 1,400, I think, was the other one. I bet them both on. I bet one on FanDuel and one on DraftKings. So if you want to check out a division bet that could pay off nicely, check those out. Other than that, I don't like anything in this game for them, other than the defense and Javonte Williams. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Looking at Arizona versus San Francisco. This is another game that I like. I like the San Francisco side on this one. Purdy's got a pretty good matchup. On the San Francisco side, we're looking at 19.1 DraftKings points a game is what Arizona's given up to quarterbacks, and they're giving up 14.9 DraftKings points a game to the slot, as well as 26.7 DraftKings points a game to running backs. San Francisco concentrates a lot of their offense through the middle of the field, which is where Arizona's been weak, and this sets up perfectly for a Purdy to Debo stack. Game log for Purdy. It hasn't done too much. He had that 26-point game against the Rams. I think he could, in a competitive game, he could put up a similar number. I like Purdy this week. I like Debo this week. I think Debo's got a nice matchup. And he had 10 DraftKings points last week, 21 the week before that, 18 the week before that. So Debo in a good spot. I'm not a huge fan of Ayuk this week. We're in a situation here. We got notes on him. As far as Debo, he's got the highest, this is courtesy of Rich Rebar, highest target rate per route run against zone coverage and leads the team in target rate per route run in general. Let's see. Yeah, so Samuel is the guy that I lean towards in this matchup. He's just getting too much opportunity. And, it's Arizona's defense. I think that Purdy to Samuel stacks are in play this week. I like running it back maybe with McBride would probably be the most. Actually, no, he doesn't even have a good matchup. The best matchup on Arizona's side is the slot receivers, which might actually be good for McBride. He probably runs as a receiving tight end, probably runs a lot of slot routes. So looking at Dortch, he's the primary slot receiver for Arizona. He's at 4,500. He might be a guy worth running it back if you need salary relief. I do think that there's better options for salary relief this week. You could go with Harrison and hope that he can beat the matchup. Difficult matchup for Harrison, but we've seen his upside. And Harrison's a guy, honestly, that could beat the difficult matchup. As far as that matchup, San Francisco's only giving up 15 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, but it's Marvin Harrison, and he's shown a lot of upside so far this season. So he could be a good guy to leave in the player pool. He's expensive though at 7,500. So maybe McBride, Dortch, or maybe even run a naked stack against Arizona. Why try to figure it out? We know that San Francisco will, pass the ball like throughout a game, even if they're winning. Jordan Mason also has a really good matchup. Arizona's giving up 27.6 or 26.7 DraftKings points a game to running back position. So that makes Mason a good play this week. And 27 DraftKings points. He scored over 20 DraftKings points in 3 out of 4 so far this season. Only one he busted in was against the Rams, where he should have broken out for us. But that's the only game that he's busted in so far this season. So he's got a really good potential there. He is getting expensive, though. He's now at 7,400. All right, let's move on to Green Bay versus the Rams. Really good matchup for Green Bay, and I think that's going to show up in the ownership. If we're looking at the ownership for Jordan Love, I'm seeing over 10%, around 11, 12% for Jordan Love. He's about the same amount as Jaden Daniels. That's for good reason, with the Rams giving up 18.9 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. They're giving up 28.2 DraftKings points a game to running backs. Jacobs is in play as well. They're giving up 26.2 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. It's really easy to stack Jordan Love with wideouts. And this week we got some injuries. Kupp is out. As far as for the Packers, a lot of drama going on with Dubs. Dubs is like skipping practice and stuff like that. Don't know what's going on with him. Watson is also doubtful. That's going to leave Wicks extremely in play. Reed extremely in play. Anytime you can get a condensed, this offense condensed like that, Reed and Wicks, solid guys and solid matchups. And Melton, Bo Melton is the guy that kind of crawls out from the woodworks when we're missing multiple receivers on the Green Bay side. We saw it last year. He had a monster game when he was given the opportunity. He's got 4.3 speed, I believe. And he's in a really good matchup here against the Rams. And best part, he's only 3,300. And right now, I'm currently seeing, as far as his ownership, I don't think people have caught on to Bo Melton just yet. He's at a 0.5% ownership projection. Bo Melton is a perfect guy for salary relief at 3,300. Let's hope that ownership stays low and people aren't thinking about him. Although I do think that those tides will turn and he'll be a popular option. As far as the Rams side, let's see. The Packers are weak against wideouts. They're giving up 26 DraftKings points a game, 24.5 DraftKings points a game. This is the type of game where if Stafford can pick apart this defense with the scrubs he's throwing to and keep this game competitive, this is definitely a shootout potential game. Like 47.5 point total. With Green Bay is only 3-point favorites, which is surprising to me. Kyron Williams has a good matchup. 22.5 DraftKings points a game is what Green Bay's given up to the running back position. The tight ends, Tucker Kraft has a good matchup. Not as good as Gesicki, though. And Kraft is pulling in about like 20% ownership or something ridiculous. So I'm not going to be having much Kraft. He's in a timeshare on top of that. Let me check and give you guys an exact idea of the ownership for Kraft. I'm seeing Kraft at about 27% ownership, which is insane to me. So I'm going to be avoiding Kraft and pivoting at that spot. The easiest pivot is to Gesicki, who has an equally good matchup. And the Bengals have been leaning on tight ends a lot more recently. And, we've seen it with Eric All and Gesicki. Either one of those guys could maybe do well this week in a good matchup. Whittington is a guy that was getting a lot of snaps last week. He got a lot of targets as well. He got 8 targets, 12 DraftKings points. Another guy that I like on the Rams, who usually pops off in these types of opportunities, is Tutu Atwell. When they have no other weapons to throw to, that's where we see Atwell kind of do his damage. 6 targets last week, 5 targets the week before that, and 4 the week before that. At 4,900, Tutu Atwell is in play as a potential option for us. Let me see what his ownership is. I don't know what what people have been saying about this game. I'm kind of going in blind, so you guys are learning. I'm learning stuff that you guys probably already know if you're watching this and have watched other content throughout the week. But that's why I like doing this. So I'm giving you guys just like pure spreadsheet information. All right, so Tutu Atwell, not a lot of ownership. He's sub 10%. Reed and Wicks should probably both be towards 20%, I would imagine. Let me check out Reed. Yeah, 21% for Reed. I think Wicks is going to be right there too. If we can get that discount at Bo Melton, Melton is the guy for this matchup. Although Reed and Wicks are very good plays too. You could even stack maybe Reed and Melton or Wicks and Melton to get yourself a little bit different with your stacks. Giants versus Seattle. I kind of like Walker in this game. We saw him have a breakout week last week. That's going to be a tough one, though, because we got a lot of salary relief that we need. And he is at 6,800. 31 DraftKings points last week, 21 in 22 DraftKings points in week 1. So Walker is firmly in play. He could be a good pivot off of Kyron Williams, actually, if you don't want to play the Kyron Williams chalk. Let's see what Walker's ownership is. 23% ownership, so he's not cheap with ownership. So reminder, guys, hit that like button. We're going to dig into some lineups now. Hit that like button, get me to 30 likes so we can put out a shorter video later on. Subscribe to the channel. Get me to 1,000 subscribers. I'm so close. I'm about 20 subscribers off of that. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That's what helps me out. Yeah, and let's break this down. I've had a lot of success with these lineups the last couple weeks, and week 1 in particular, the lineup that I built on the show ended up coming in third place in the slant or a close variation of it. And last week I was up in 6th place in the SPY up until about 2 minutes left in the last game on the slate. So that one would have been a big hit too. Couldn't get Marvin Harrison going in that one. All right, so let's get the entire slate here. All right, so going to start off with our stack. I'm going to lean first with I like Purdy's price. You look at him relative to all these other guys. I think he's got a good matchup. I like Purdy. I'm going to stack him with Debo. Purdy, let's look at his ownership. Let's look at Samuel's ownership. Debo, we're looking at even Debo's 19% owned. Purdy is 14% owned. So they're not cheap with ownership, but let's say for the sake of this stack, so the sake of this stack, going with Purdy and Debo. If I'm running it back, I'm going to be running it back with McBride and just hope he can beat this matchup and gets that slot work. I like Derrick Henry a lot this week. I want to put him in there. Let's go to our defense. There's some cheap defense options that are good for us. Broncos and Patriots, I like both of them. I'm going to go with the Broncos in this one. Wide receivers. Let's see. I like the matchup for Reed a lot. I want to get a skinny stack of that Jacksonville Indy game just in case that game ends up with the right environment we're looking for. We're looking for Joe Flacco, and we're looking for no rain. So let's get Pittman in there. And Thomas is the one that has the best matchup on the Jacksonville side. I didn't talk about Thomas at the top. I like Thomas a lot this week. So we're looking at 4,200 per guy. Let's get Melton in there to give us that relief. That's going to leave us with 5,200 for our last spot. We're looking at Javonte. You can match him up with that Broncos D. We're looking at Gibson. If you believe the talk of Ramondre getting less work. Let's scroll down to some of these wide receivers. McLaughlin's only 5K, FYI, or 4,300 if you want to use him over Javonte. See a bunch of running backs here at the 4K range. Oh, it's because I'm looking at running back. Yeah, let me go back to that. Let's take another look at these options here. Jerry Jeudy, good option this week. Leggett broke out last week. Not as good a opportunity this week. Downs, if you want to double stack. Wicks. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking. I need to actually be looking at running backs. I don't know what I'm doing here. If we wanted to take out, let's take out Melton. Let's put Let's put Javonte in there. Let's give you guys an opportunity to just hit 3,300. That's basically Melton. So, I mean, that's an option, direction that you can go. If you think that, let's see. Let's go with someone other than Purdy. Let's get Samuel out of there too. I don't like the ownership on those guys. Let's say that we wanted to go Flacco in this one. Assuming that this game Flacco is going to play and it's going to be no rain. We got Flacco to Pittman. We got Thomas in there. If we want to put in Melton again, let's put him in. Gives us 7,500 for that flex spot. 7,500. You can get Harrison Jr. in there. You can get Mason in there, who's a great play. I'm not a fan of A-Chain this week. Jared Cook, kind of torn on him. He's burned me a bunch of times, but as far as recommending against him, and he burned me. Metcalf is having a great year. He's got that matchup against New York. Diggs, the guy that I talked about earlier. Walker. So many good options here if you go with like Flacco and Melton. If you wanted to put Wicks in there instead of Melton, I think Wicks has the better of the matchups on the Green Bay side. 5,800 in the flex it's going to leave us with. That gives us opportunity like Ford if you wanted to go there. Smith and Jigba. Not really excited about either of those guys. Trey Sermon has that great matchup and would also give us another guy in this game. Swift has that great matchup. Akers should handle the workload for Buffalo, although I do think that what's his face is back. Not Mixon, but the guy that was the starter for Houston a couple years ago. Can't think of his name right now. Let's see if it says it. Dameon Pierce, that's right. Dameon Pierce. Jacoby Myers should see plenty of opportunity. He's going to have a bad matchup. Brock Bowers, don't like Brock Bowers against man coverage, which Denver likes to run. Dell's another opportunity for us. Kincaid with Khalil Shakir out. Jerry Jeudy talked about. A lot of good options here. If we wanted to put in Jeudy, where would that leave us for opportunity in the running back position? Ford, Sermon, Swift, Chase Brown, Akers, a lot of good opportunities there to throw in there. Let's swap it out even more. Let's put in Watson. We got Jeudy in there already. That gives us 6K. If we wanted to run it back with somebody, maybe let's get rid of let's get Jeudy in there. Let's say that those conditions don't work out for us. Let's get rid of Pittman. Let's put in Wicks. Watson to Jeudy. Let's run it back with McLaurin. Let's get rid of Thompson. Because I do want to have that exposure to Green Bay this week. 5,900 that leaves us with. Let's put in a running back here. Let's go with Stevenson. Leaves us with 5,800 in the flex. So it gives you an idea of direction that we can go in the flex. But, that's all for now. Make sure to hit that like button. Give me the 30 likes. Hit that subscribe button, get me to 1,000 subscribers. I'm very close to 1,000 subscribers. Only need 20 more of those. Definitely appreciate the help with that. And make sure to check out the game script episode on the London game. We recorded that with Spread the other day. So that will be a good breakdown that you're going to need for building your showdown lineups for the London game, and help you out with your research so you're not scrambling to get that done before the game starts early in the morning on Sunday. So thanks for watching, guys. And 30 likes, and I'll get that short video out later on when I have more thoughts on the slate. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.